My father had dogs, and the dogs were sent off to be trained, and there was one lovely puppy that went off to be trained and never came back. Apparently, the puppy had been sent to the farm. I wasn't deceived in any way. I knew what happened on farms. And the problem is, some people some people evade training, some people evade education. Bear that in mind, because the recent intervention by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's had a number of interventions since all the riots began. He's not been silent. Justin Welby has labelled the recent right-wing riots as racist and unchristian, and he's sparked some sort of debate. While his remarks resonate with those who condemn the violence, there's a growing conversation about whether his characterisation of the riots as purely racist is overly simplistic. I think it is. It raises questions about the complex nature of the riots, the motivations of those involved, whether now is the right time to delve into these complexities or focus on restoring order and healing. Who do we hold responsible? Because the people who were inciting those riots, I think, are going to walk away scot-free. So, certainly, the first point is that there's manifest racism in the activities. Racism is clear. The riots involved explicit attacks on mosques, asylum seekers, minority communities, all of which are clear indicators of racist motivation. The use of Christian iconography by rioters also adds a disturbing layer, suggesting a belief in the superiority of one group over another. The flags, of course, the St. George flag, is quintessentially Christian, no matter who's waving it. The historical parallels, the past instances of far-right violence in the UK, such as the National Front activities in the 1970s, just as then, today's far-right riots are fueled by xenophobia, particularly against Muslims and immigrants. And these actions are in direct opposition to the principles of equality and respect for all people, regardless of race or religion, which the wider church and our society uphold. The political rhetoric and the misinformation, and this is where it starts to get rather difficult to isolate the actual causes. Welby points out the riots were detonated by lies and fueled by deliberate misinformation. That misinformation often has racist undertones, scapegoating minority groups for the broader issues that are affecting large groups in society. And the spread of such lies reflects deep-seated racial prejudices within segments of society, making the racist label not just appropriate but necessary, and reminding us all really where this goes, because it's all been there before. Maybe slightly different groups were identified for the racist attacks, but it's all been there before. You only have to look back to the 1930s. However, while racism is certainly a factor, labelling the riots as purely racist may overlook the broader socioeconomic frustrations that fueled such unrest and continue to fuel unrest in our society. And many of those people who were involved in the riots come from marginalised backgrounds, themselves facing poverty, unemployment, a sense of disenfranchisement, a frustration with the powers that be, an irritation with the way Brexit was sold and then delivered. These individuals may be lashing out not only because of racist beliefs, but also because of a broader sense of betrayal and anger. And that betrayal and anger may be bigger than the racism. There are motivations behind these riots which are not monolithic. The crowd is certainly there are far-right extremists, racists included in the crowds, disillusioned citizens, but there are also those simply caught up in the chaos, not only in the chaos of the moment, but in the chaos of the mood. And as The Guardian, for example, has suggested, some participants lacked a clear understanding of what they were protesting about. It's a more complex and amorphous set of grievances go beyond simple racism. And the simplicity of Justin Welby's identification and finger pointing is really beneath the role of a leading cleric, a leading member of the elite in this country. It's his job to embrace the country, not just his own flock, but because he is the leading religious individual in this country, he should be thinking in a much broader sense. And in the immediate aftermath of the violence, the priority should be on restoring order and preventing further violence, rather than dissecting the precise motivations of the rioters. Welby's focus on labelling the rioters as racist risks alienating those who feel their broader concerns are being ignored, potentially exacerbating these divisions, potentially actually egging them on. His call for a deeper understanding, understanding the causes of division, is quite important, and he's right to be doing that. But whether this is the right moment and whether he is right to lead that debate, that is more questionable. Immediate efforts must be focused on healing, rebuilding, and preventing further violence. And that means listening, rather than pontificating. And Welby, even though he is the leading cleric in the country, he's not the pontiff. He should refrain from behaving like a pontiff. Long-term peace requires addressing the underlying causes of such unrest, included but not limited to racism, and the socioeconomic despair, the misinformation, the political disenfranchisement that drive individuals to extremes must be understood and addressed. Otherwise, there will be no recovery. Otherwise, all you're doing is suppressing and slapping down the undercurrent of frustration rather than resolving it. So I think Welby's condemnation as riots of these riots as racist and unchristian is a moral and perhaps even a necessary stance for him to take so that he can understand what's going on, but it oversimplifies a deeply complex situation. And while the racist elements are undeniable and to be condemned, a more nuanced approach that considers the broader socio-economic and political contexts is required for a long-term reconciliation and understanding, and it's that reconciliation and understanding which is necessary to move forward. And it's not simply about Starmer's crackdown with punishment, and it's not simply about sort of finger-wagging and saying everyone's a racist. There are racists, and there is certainly racism spreading through almost all the groups that have coalesced. But that doesn't mean that every single person who is out on the streets causing a problem, or not causing a problem, is a racist. It certainly isn't true. And I think now is the moment to prioritise peace and stability, but deeper analysis must follow to prevent a recurrence of such violence and such division, along with a commitment to education. And from that point of view, Starmer's commitment to educating anyone over the age of 5 in critical thinking, that is a great move forward. But it needs to be predicated on the availability and the circulation of decent textbooks to help teachers. They don't need to be written, they don't need to be printed, but they need to be written, and they can be circulated on the internet. I think now is the time to be thinking about good internet content that can be distributed safely in schools at every single level, and that can form the backbone to good informed lessons and lesson plans. This is the sort of thing that I've been crying out for since I was forced to teach PHSE and realised how useless it was as a concept and how vapid and amorphous was the support that existed for teaching such lessons. And in the same way, I think the support that exists for teaching mainstream religious education, RERS or whatever you want to call it, particularly given its modern bias towards philosophy and ethics. Philosophy is easy to structure. Ethics is this bland, amorphous subject that is often about good intentions rather than facts. And it's the facts and it's the way of thinking that we need to teach. A methodology in processing and analysing language. And without that, at every single level in a school career and a university career, without that, we're either trying to do some sort of vague political indoctrination, which must be condemned, or we're just filling in space with a tick box exercise and a nod to woke and political correctness, which is equally insubstantial and futile. We need to change our society so our society is thinking, so our society is more empathetic, so our society is more functional. Because tearing up the streets is a destructive, not a creative activity. We need our society to be engaged in creativity, not destruction.